Well, it was a pretty full weekend of news considering a double snowstorm, the Four Nations Cup happening, Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary, Vladimir Guerrero and the Toronto Blue Jays not figuring things out, also a plane crash at Pearson Airport. So many of you may have missed the fact that the provincial leaders had a debate on Monday night. Yeah, Family Day. So since we're just over a week away from heading to the polls, we're going to get you caught up. I chatted with the host of the O Show podcast and Hamilton-based political pundit Laura Babcock to get her thoughts on Monday night's provincial leaders debate.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the difference in demeanor of Premier Ford from past debates. In past debates, we've seen him be more folksy, more charming, trying to engage the audience. It seemed as though this debate, he has almost assumed it's a foregone conclusion. He didn't seem particularly engaged, didn't seem like the affable Doug that people like. He seemed quite uptight. And even though he had a good performance in terms of being on his messaging, and he was not as nervous as Bonnie Crombie was, certainly, it didn't really leave an impression that he was fighting for the voters or fighting for the votes. And so I think that might have left kind of a bad taste in people's mouths. And I bring up that analogy because one of the interesting things in this debate was they threw in some questions that had nothing to do with politics. And it was almost like that was the best chance to get insight, Jason, when they asked about what they would cook. If they had everybody over. And you heard this long story from Bonnie Crombie about her Polish heritage and learning from her grandmother in the rooming house. It was quite engaging. And Ford said mac and cheese, right? So that's just an example of he was kind of get me in and get me out and didn't take the scrum afterwards, didn't take the questions from the media that were supposed to happen. Whereas you saw the other candidates really fighting for those votes. So I think it was distinctive in that way in terms of tone. And you'll also find that I think Bonnie Crombie, although she had a wobbly performance, probably did a good job introducing herself to the voter. And I think that's why today we're seeing Bonnie saying that their campaign now is going to ask for NDP voters to vote Liberal to stop Doug Ford, which is a strategic pitch, quite bold, but I think it's a reflection of last night's performance.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, we've seen all of the candidates run. We're only a week away. I think the big question here is actually not who's going to win this election, but can Bonnie Crombie achieve official opposition status? What do you think?
Well, I think so. And the reason why I say that is because one of the big problems Bonnie Crombie was having for months was the Trudeau brand federally, the Liberal brand federally. That's seen a huge swing. I mean, right now, if Mark Carney was the candidate going up against Poilievre, he could bring the Liberals back to majority. So I think she benefits from that branding change on the federal conversation. And also, I think that there are a lot of people who are concerned with Doug Ford's record on the economy, record on important issues like not getting the housing targets met, being late with some of his transit projects. And the Greenbelt scandal, of course. So Doug Ford's record is not great. He's pushing this quick election because of the opportunity around Trump's tariffs. But that was really his only argument to Ontario was I'll do economy, I'll work even harder and I'll stop Trump. But I think a lot of Ontarians might want to park a protest vote, Jason, against Doug Ford because of the things that he has not done as premier with a majority for 7 years. And so they might want to give it over to the Bonnie Crombie Liberals. And I think that's why we're seeing the Liberals say, you know what, progressive votes, just come over to the Liberal Party and we see if we can't get this done and get an official opposition.
So let's keep it hyper-local here. We have 5 ridings in Halton. All of them are currently Conservative. All of the MPPs are returning, aside from Ted Arnott, who was, I believe, the longest-standing MPP up in Halton Hills. He has decided to not run again. But do you see any of these ridings going a different way than just being the Conservatives coming back into power?
Well, if there is, and as I said, if there's a desire to send a message to Ford, maybe around some of his more controversial things like the Ontario Science Centre and what happened with Ontario Place and maybe the 413, if people are looking at those projects or what happened with the Greenbelt and they're saying, you know what, don't love that, don't think that his priorities align with mine, then maybe Bonnie will pick up some votes. I think where there's opportunity more so is in the Hamilton area where there were some NDP seats. I think that's an opportunity, not so much for Ford, but certainly for the Liberals. I'm seeing a sea of red in my NDP riding here on Hamilton Mountain. I think that's interesting.
I think Hamilton is fascinating, and that is where you are based in particular. I just want to touch on Hamilton Center here for our friends on Cable 14 because we are broadcast there as well. You know, you have former NDP MPP Sarah Jama now running as an independent. How do you think the vote gets split here? Because you got to figure some of her voters will follow her, some of the voters will stay NDP. I guess perhaps the worry you could say for those people who aren't interested in Premier Ford is that the Conservatives creep in here and take another seat.
Well, I think if there are progressive voters, certainly ones that I'm hearing from who really want to stop Ford, if they look at this, the battle, the split happening in Hamilton Center, and there was a great expose by Margaret Skimba that came out about what happened behind the scenes, according to Sarah, but it looks like a lot of internecine problems, right? It looks like a lot of infighting within the party. I don't think that's ever good for brand. And so I would say that probably NDP voters who are disenfranchised by what the NDP leadership did to Sarah may decide that they want to put a vote with the Liberals if they don't think that Sarah really has an opportunity to get her seat back. But anytime you've got a party fighting in a long-held riding like that, it's not a good look for the party. And that might result in people moving to more of a Liberal vote, actually.